actually the next topic, the one that you were talking about.
You're talking about the Jayland Walker.
Jayland Walker.
I wasn't talking about that at all. I know very little.
No, not Jayland Walker. I mean, we can segue into that, but the whole community policing thing.
Oh yeah. I mean, but to start it off, essentially, the Jayland Walker. I know that you didn't look too in depth into it. I know you haven't seen the video or anything yet, but essentially what happened is Jayland Walker, who is being portrayed as this really good kid, DoorDash delivery driver, led police. He's getting pulled over. He led police on a chase, shot at them, and then proceeded to get out of the car and lead them on a foot chase. And when he turned around, his hands were in his waistband, and they shot him 60 times. Obviously, Jesus. The reason he was shot so much is because there was just simply more officers there. And obviously any officer or person who feels that their life is in danger. And again, as someone who had shot at them prior to this incident and them not knowing that he still had his gun on him, I mean, they all clearly are going to claim that they were in fear of their lives. And so the reason I'm talking about this...
excessive force in order to make sure that there's no chance of him attacking them and etc. I think we're all familiar with the motivations of the police training in this issue, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say excessive. I would say that, it was just simply the number of officers that were there.
Yeah, I think if you have a bunch of scared
it's excessive.
Officers, yeah.
Not necessarily because
of based
on police policy.
I mean, not even shooting at you. He was shooting at them earlier that day.
So during the police chase, he shot at them.
Okay, then.
And so essentially, the point is for all policies, when it pertains to police officers, they're supposed to shoot until the threat is basically dead or stopped. Yeah. So essentially, when you have all of those officers with that same policy, essentially in their mind, they're all going to be firing their entire magazine at that person, which is why he was shot 60 times. And so the reason I bring this up is because I want to get your guys' view on this, because Black Lives Matter and everybody's coming out saying that this, it was just another unarmed black man killed, because he didn't have the firearm on him at the time. It was recovered in the car, but he didn't have it on him at the time. And so I just was curious about what you guys thought about the whole situation, because we have one side already claiming, bloody murder for this kid dying, for endangering other lives, shooting at police officers, giving them a reason to essentially shoot this kid.
I mean, yeah, I wish he wasn't dead, but in a situation like that where you've shot at police officers and there's tons of them chasing you because they have to get rid of this threat for the greater good.
For society. Yeah. I mean, he could have killed someone running. It's a tough situation.
I would have loved for him to have just been arrested, but when you have all these people who are anxious, this guy already shot at you earlier, and his hands are at his waist. I could see why he got shot.
Exactly. I mean, I don't know what your personal views are on it, Connor, but my personal thoughts are, this isn't like a Trayvon Martin. This isn't George Floyd. This isn't those instances. I think, what's the guy? Fruitvale Station might play. There's a movie about it with Michael B. Jordan. But there's numerous instances of just blatant disregard for human life, especially black lives, and officers should be punished for that. But in this instance, I really don't see how, their actions were.
Surely it was a bad outcome that someone was shot and that someone was shooting at people in a way that made it look like he deserved to have been shot, right?
Well,
it seems like
I wouldn't necessarily. I wish.
I don't think he was.
I wish that
I don't think he deserved to be shot or killed.
I don't think that he should. I don't think he deserved to die.
Yeah.
I think either way you look at it, it's sad. A person lost their life at the end of the day.
I can see how that outcome happened.
But yeah, you can see through their actions, how
I don't
it led
think their
to
actions should continue. I think it's a bad policy, and the continued police pressure.
Look at it like this.
In part, contributed to the guy
what if
going out and committing police suicide.
Okay, but what if he actually did turn around with a gun and shoot and kill an officer? Then what would you say then? It would just be oh well.
It seems to be the same thing. He was still suicidal and confronting the police in a nihilistic urge of some kind, right?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of factors contributed to that, and how can we reduce the chances of that happening again?
What if he was more extreme and had, a bomb strapped to him and was willing to take out tons of police officers?
Right, definitely. Yeah, no, that's very serious.
So would you? I'm saying what's your
tragic result for him as well, and us.
The whole point we're making is what's your view of the policy, essentially, because you're saying that the policy is excessive, essentially, and that it should not be there. But
I get why it's there because you genuinely don't know what this person.
And there's numerous instances of people being on drugs. And
my
being
contention
shot,
is that the policy itself contributes to the value to that person of going out and shooting up things and presenting himself as a threat. If the policy wasn't there, he would have been less likely to do that in a roundabout fashion, because he lives in a police state where people are being killed all the time, innocently and not so innocently. He doesn't have the security and safety he needs to go about his life, so he is acting out in a way against the police state that is subduing him. It's a suicidal action.
Yeah, but overall, I mean,
but this guy specifically.
I don't know the specifics of his case, but I'm thinking of an archetypal case right now.
I don't think he was necessarily door dashing. He was a DoorDash driver. But essentially, they tried to pull him over for a simple traffic, oh, you were speeding. You didn't put on your turn signal. Oh, your taillights. It was a simple traffic infraction that he was getting pulled over, and he ran from police. Which, again, you're putting people's lives in danger.
That's also an indication that the police policy was damaging there because he really feared for his life when the police pulled him over. That could have been a life-ending thing.
I mean, that's that is an assumption.
But as soon as they pulled him over, they applied a lot of pressure to him that didn't need to be applied. That escalated the situation.
Another assumption.
Not necessarily. I mean, again,
we don't know.
I think his actions running go to the idea that pressure was applied to him.
That is, some people just speed the fuck
but that's what I'm saying. Look at it like this. He had an illegal firearm.
I've seen that plenty of times.
You have to look at it. The way I look at the situation is he had an illegal firearm on him, and when he got pulled over, he was scared that it would be discovered. So instead of just pulling over and being like, you know what, I'm probably going to go to jail for this, he decided to run instead because he thought he could get away.
If he had assumed that the policy was to have some guy come over and say, hey, what's up, man? And maybe not search the car, not discover the firearm, or if they had discovered the firearm, say, hey, it's cool, man, just deliver it to the police station later, we'll give you some money for it, he wouldn't have panicked and thought that he was in any danger. He was in danger, or he thought that he was in danger because of the police policies that he was familiar with surrounding the illegal firearm, not necessarily the firearm itself.
I mean, I think essentially what it is, again, when you do wrong, when you're a bad person, when you've stolen a car, when you have robbed a store, when you've done something bad, you have something on you that you're not supposed to have, and that the government will put you in jail for. I think that there's definitely I need to run for my life
you still mindset. Have this articulation of there's bad people and good people, and the bad people are doing crime, and the good people aren't.
I mean, no, I do think that there's everybody makes mistakes. Everybody breaks the law in some instance, whether it be a traffic law and reckless driving, getting a DUI, or if you're murdering people. There's definitely all different types of crime within society, and it's not like all people in society are good. But I do think that, in this instance, it was whether he was a good kid or not. I mean, he chose to make poor decisions. Why did he have the illegal firearm? And that probably led him to run because he was like, if this is discovered, I could go to jail for a very long time, which is in turn led to him losing his life because of stupid actions.
Shorter sentences would also de-escalate the situation. That's one of the motives of decriminalization and abolitionism, is to lessen the pressures on somebody if they do get arrested, so that they can come out of it thinking, this isn't a setback, I'm going to be punished, but I might receive help that will help me choose or make the right decisions later on.
So in what instance, what policy would you like to have seen in this instance that would have made this better? Because again, the thing that I see with abolitionists is defund the police, which is it's gained a lot of traction.
Imagine that he was approached in a traffic stop by someone who was unarmed and had no power to lock him up for the firearm.
He could have easily killed the officer then.
I don't think he would have had much of a reason to. But he obviously had more of a reason to run. But it definitely contributes to his motives in the area.
Look. When
people are approaching random people, there is some element of danger when they approach random people.
I just saw a video last night, and it was a meme because this dude in the UK was getting stopped by an unarmed officer, and the dude in turn threw the officer on the ground and put him in handcuffs. The officer. Mm-hmm. And so essentially what you have, if you have unarmed officers trying to de-escalate situations. There are plenty of people in this society, as we have seen, who shoot up people in mass shootings, who shoot up schools, who just kill people in gang violence, domestic violence, all kinds of stuff. If they know that the officer does not have a gun, they have nothing. No, there's nothing to fear.
Right,
if you have
exactly.
But if you have nothing to fear,
there's no threat
then they can kill the offer and then go about
Why
their
would
day.
they?
Because they are not scared. Think
You
about
seem to have this idea that the character of the person leads them to do these random acts of violence, but that's not really how the psychology of the attacker works.
I mean, not necessarily. I mean, if again, if I was a criminal and I was robbing a bank and the police showed up and they did not have guns, I have no reason at all to stop for them.
Yeah.
Like, why? What are you gonna do? I have a gun. You don't.
So the abolitionist idea is that if the police don't have guns, you don't as much have to rob the bank, because the police not having guns is also part of another holistic policy intervention. So where there's banks in the neighborhood and you have savings there, so you don't need to rob it.
No, I don't think that works, because then if you don't have armed enforcers, you can't enforce the law. If you don't have people
enforcers, you can't enforce.
I mean, it's
really
a
hard
prime
to
example
enforce the
in the
law
UK.
like that.
Whenever someone actually has a weapon, like a knife, and they confront officers, the officers have to call people with guns to come in to de-escalate the situation.
Like a good policy, right?
I mean, not necessarily, because in that instance, what if, like, again, I told you about the dude who's on video assaulting an officer, throwing him on the ground, and then putting him in handcuffs. Well, what if that guy instead had a knife on him and just decided to kill the officer in front of him?
You're also not considering all of the negative consequences of police approaching all of these situations with the idea that they might get shot, and approaching them violently. The police approaching situations with the intent to de-escalate and with the idea that it's probably not going to lead to violence and that they don't need to, reduces the amount of violence that's going to happen overall.
I believe that's
mostly
a very,
like police
very
against
strong
the
assumption.
people and the people against the police. And this is not just an assumption. This is the way it works in
I mean,
Europe.
sure, but
where
they shouldn't
don't
go
have
in there
guns.
without guns or without.
I mean, again,
being prepared.
the reason
It
Because at
depends
the
on
end of the
call
day,
they're-
they have
they're
no
answering
idea
to.
who's if they're doing
Like
a traffic
95%
stop,
of the calls that police take are
me.
not in regards to violent crime at all.
That is true.
And they
Yeah.
don't need guns for those
but
situations.
like at the end of the day, they still genuinely don't know what they're walking into.
Exactly.
Like if you're just doing a traffic stop, you have no idea if this could be some gangbanger.
I mean, prime example, a few
cartel dude
weeks
who just
ago,
wants to shoot up cops.
a few weeks ago, an officer pulled over someone in San Bernardino, and this was body cam footage was released and everything. It's all
I'm
good.
stretching my leg.
It's all good.
And so essentially, what happened is this guy was in a BMW with no plates on it, and that's why he got pulled over. Hey man, you don't have plates on your car. I'm just gonna write you a simple ticket, right? The guy gave the officer bad information, like fake name, fake address, and the car actually ended up being stolen.
Mm-hmm.
Once they found out that the car was stolen, they were like, "You need to exit the vehicle." He took off running. He hit numerous cars, and then immediately started shooting at the officer after this police chase. And then he suicided by cop in that instance. And so
Well, they cornered him by threatening to put him into a legal system that wasn't just and would have ruined his
So I'm
life.
just saying, in that instance, what would you have done? The dude was armed. He had stolen a vehicle, and
Why are you asking what I would have done rather than what the police should
Well,
have done?
what- I'm
rather
not
than
necessarily what
the
you would have
guy
done.
should have done in a situation with different.
I'm basically
incentive
in
structures.
this you're talking about this specific abolitionist view of police, and I'm saying you're speaking to that point, and I'm saying in this instance, what would that abolitionist view have been?
The abolitionist view would have been that the person was cornered and reduced to a suicidal situation because he viewed he had no more options once he had stolen the car. The abolitionists would want to prevent him from stealing the car in the first place by preventing the causes that led him to need to steal the car and want to steal the car. That means
you're not
reducing
selling me
lead
on.
in gasoline, for instance, legalizing abortion, all of these broader holistic policy initiatives that prevent crime from happening in the first place.
Okay, but that's for an idealistic world. We don't live in that. That's for assuming that's
a policy
that's going
intervention,
based
and
off
we've done
of the
those
assumption
before.
that
I mean, but
everything is
look at-
already based. That's going off the assumption that everything is already based in a reality where things are much easier per se. I guess would be
What
like
what do
in
you
terms
mean?
of like those the causation things that you're talking about, those are already in effect. That's not necessarily the
those
case.
aren't in effect, and we need to make those changes.
Okay, so
even
then fair. Then what are we gonna do now when a cop is going up to a random pullover and he doesn't know what situation he could be getting into? Like, realistically, what would you?
I mean, obviously, you continue to do the things that you're doing because you aren't doing anything else broadly to change the incentive structures of that situation. So it's like you seem to be asking me, what do you do in a situation where you've done nothing, to stop that situation from happening? You do whatever you need to do, but first you stop those situations from happening in the future.
But see, it's my whole point with that is
so then
the
you kind of
abolitionist
agree
view,
with us.
Well, yeah, the abolitionist view.
I agree that the police had no choice within the incentive structures that they already had to shoot the guy. That it's a very human thing to shoot that person 60 times given the situation that they were in.
Right.
But the situation is a tragedy, and it should have been prevented with policy proposals. And one of those policies is to demilitarize the police so that and demilitarize the justice system so that those
for sure,
people
making
aren't
the justice
cornered
system more
and
human,
less people have a reason to shoot police, because there'll still be those random people, like you say, who are having a schizophrenic break or what have you, or on some kind of uncontrollable situation, who are marginalized by virtue of them just being marginalized. But there are all sorts of people, the majority of people in those situations, I like to believe, who are there because of the environment that they're in and the choices that they were forced to make in their life because they had access to no other choices.
I mean, I understand that, but I just think that, we're seeing that now as they're defunding the police and crime has gone up. All types of crime
I don't think that is a criticism of abolition, because the defund the police policies as they've played out by, decriminalizing a few random crimes and lessening sentences on a few random people, I don't think that's really in good faith abolitionism, and it shouldn't be an indication that abolitionism isn't working. It hasn't been tried yet, not even in Portland or any of these other places. Taking police off the street in the short term, you saw it in Boston is a great example. There's a great HBO series on it. They went on strike, and in the short term, crime increased dramatically, but they never fixed any of the problems with the relationship between the people that were being policed and the police. So they never actually engaged with the abolition.
I understand
that.
what you're
I
saying.
agree with that. I think in general, policing should be brought down to more community level policing.
Right. Yeah.
That would, in turn, I still think they should be armed with guns and whatnot, but that would in turn give them more hesitation in terms of like murdering someone. Or
have you guys played
someone.
Disco Elysium?
No.
It's a great detective game, but it's in a fantasy world where all of the police have single-shot muskets, and they have to load a new ball and spend like 2 minutes to do so. They can only get away with this because nobody else in society has anything more powerful than that. Everybody else has single-shot muskets too. So the police aren't at a disadvantage, and then they can lower their threat level all the way down as far as possible so that it's less likely that in any situation they get into, they're going to be wrong and shoot the wrong person.
So essentially what you're saying is change the entire policies of...
I want to demilitarize both the public and the police. I want to lower the threat levels of everybody and their
I
ability
just
to
find
cause havoc.
that unrealistic.
No, I don't know. I
find it
don't want to
unrealistic.
demilitarize the public. I think it's probably a good thing.
You don't want to demilitarize the public.
I mean, no, seriously. I mean,
Interesting.
Second Amendment is there for a reason, man. I mean, look at Trudeau.